Africa, the continent in the world that contains 54 countries. According to World Perception Index 2016 by Transparency International, 11 of African countries are the top 20 of the most corrupted country in the world. And as we knew, Somalia is the number one most corrupted country in the world. Africa is also the poorest continent in the world. According to the CIA World Factbook, only one country outside the Africa in the top 10 poorest country in the world, measured by its GDP, gross domestic product. Corruption is presently one of the major challenges facing the human race. The world over, corruption is increasingly being seen as a threat to human existence, to the extent that some commentators have called for it to be recognized as crime against humanity. Corruption is worse than prostitution. The latter might endanger the moral of an individual. The former invariably endanger the morals of an entire country. What is corruption? Corruption is seen as a social, legal, economic, and political concept. The definition focuses on one of several aspects of the phenomenon. M. Khan, in Political and Administrative Corruption, Concepts, Comparative Experience, and Bangladesh Case, proposed that the various approach of corruption can be placed into 5 groups, namely public interest centered, market centered, public office centered, and public opinion centered, and legislative. Despite this proposition, corruption is defined in the context of state-society relationship, where distinction made between political and bureaucratic corruption, redistributive and extractive corruption, and more particularly, the purpose in this video, corruption is used to mean the use of public office for private gain. Corruption increased positively from one historical era to another, with the complex nature of corruption involving violence being introduced in Africa through colonialism. This brand of corruption survived the struggle for independence in many African countries and has since been nourished by weak institutions and leadership in post-colonial Africa. The institutions were later emasculated to enhance concentration of state power in the hands of cabals of political, thus creating an environment not conducive to participatory democracy and the development of an expanded economic role of the state. The root causes of corruption vary from place to place depending on the political, social, economic, and cultural circumstances. In Africa, some of the identifiable causes of corruption include the negative colonial legacy, poor leadership, political of the belly, omnipotent state, greed and selfishness, clientelism, patronage, nepotism, absence of popular participation of the public in government, weak institution of government, lack of accountability and transparency, lack of political will, weak ethical values, centralist nature of the state and concentration of the state power, weak judicial system, and constant insecurity and conflicts. Despite the myriad factors that contribute to or cause corruption, in the case of Africa, the deep-seated governance problem seems to be explained why the continent is viewed as very corrupt. At independence, most African states and by extension leaders preoccupied themselves with the politics of survival, using military coups or the other to consolidate power through the jure or de facto, one-party states which guaranteed them security of tenure, but which they also used to propagate their so-called development agenda for the nation. This only worked to perpetuate neo-colonialism, exploitation of the people, and resentment of any dissenting voice. Nepotism, ethnicity, race, and other factors become key consideration in the allocation and application of national resources. Individuals in high office in both the public and private sector use their power and influence to amass wealth to the detriment of the common person. This coupled with incentive donor programs create and sustain bad governance, entrench corruption and impunity, and increase poverty levels. The impact of corruption on income equality and poverty is considerable. A worsening in the corruption index of a country by one standard deviation increased the Gini coefficient. This video findings suggest that the adverse distributional of consequences corruption can be mitigated by sound management of natural resource, broad-based and labor-intensive growth, efficient spending on education and health, and effective targeting of social programs. And a low level of inequality and in access to education. A central message of this video is that corruption has significant distributional implication, and given its negative efficiency implication, should be considered harmful to both growth and equity. Therefore, policies that reduce corruption will also reduce income, equality, and poverty.